What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today I'm talking about Leafeon VMAX and why I decided to play it for Day 2 of the Pokemon Online Global Championships 2021, which was kind of a makeshift World Championships in lieu of the pandemic and IRL events not happening, run by community members. There was also one last year, POG 2020. So I'll be talking about grinding through day 1, making it into day 2, and what went on, those 8 hours between finishing day 1 and choosing a deck and then going to sleep and playing day 2, and why I decided to change decks. So we'll talk about that and really give you a look into metagaming and, basically metagaming and why I played Shadow the first day, Leafy on the second day, and the thoughts that went into that and stuff like that. So shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place to get ptcgo codes, and be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. Also check out PokemonCard.io for all of my standard format decks, specifically post-rotation standard format decks, since I am sharing this on September 5th, or I'm recording this on September 5th, and rotation is happening in about 5 days from the recording of this video. So going into the POG Championships 2021, there were 2 pods based on your time zone. I was in pod 2, and there were about 600-ish players in each pod. I think there was just under 1,200 players total with both pods combined. So a really, really large tournament. There were 10 Swiss rounds. You have to go 7-3 to make it into day 2. So you got to win 7 rounds. Once you win 7 rounds, you're dropped. I thought the best thing to play for day 1 was either Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX, because I think it is the best deck in format, regardless of how the metagame shapes around it. Just objectively, I think it's the strongest deck. So I thought that I could muscle some of the hard matchups, outplay some people since it's day 1 and we haven't really gotten to the cream of the crop yet. And just play a very consistent list of 2/2 Alchemy, which I had been playing for a while. So consistency, inherently powerful, that can really take care of most things, and a deck that I knew very well. My other choice was ADP Moltres Zacian, kind of just to try to counter all the Shadow Riders. But I thought Shadow Rider was just a better brute force deck to bring to try to get through day 1. And that ended up being the case. I got through day 1 with Shadow Rider, Calyrex VMAX, Alchemy VMAX. And now taking a look at what was doing well, or what went through into day 2 from pod 1 and pod 2. I saw Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX have a pretty good success rate, and Urshifu and Teleon have an abysmal success rate, which I did see coming just because Shadow Rider was a very safe play. And Dark Box Mewtwo decks also not being a good matchup for Urshifu anymore, whereas Dark Box sounds like a good matchup for Urshifu. These new builds that came out and became popular and were quite consistent, and I actually tried them out a bit, were 50-50 at best for Urshifu, but probably closer to 40-60 in Dark Box's favor. And then also a surge of Luke Metal came about, which was also pretty bad for Urshifu. So, and I also knew that Shadow Rider would be the most popular deck. Even if it wasn't the most successful, I knew it would be the most popular. So all of these things made me feel like Urshifu was probably the second most inherently powerful deck in the format in a vacuum, but the way the metagame had come together, it just wasn't in the cards for me to play Urshifu and Teleon for day 1. Now going into day 2, a lot of Dark Box, a lot of Mewtwo Weavile did well, a lot of Shadow Rider did well, a little bit of Urshi, a little bit of Ice Rider, some Suicune, some Leafeon, some Rogue Deck, some ADP Moltres, some Eternatus, good bit of Eternatus and Luke Metal and ADP Moltres. And basically I was not playing Shadow Rider for day 2. There were too many decks that I would have to get very lucky against good players to beat, so I just didn't want to do that. I knew I wasn't beating ADP Moltres in best 2 out of 3s consistently, or Eternatus, or Dark Box, so I wasn't going to do that. So immediately I thought, well, Urshifu is not the play tomorrow, so Decidueye could be good. Decidueye Could be good because Shadow Rider doesn't play Decidueye text typically. Not all Eternatus play Decidueye text. We could play something for Luke Metal, like a Doll, a Fion, a Apom promo. Mewtwo Weavile Darkbox doesn't play any Decidueye text. ADP decks weren't playing Decidueye text. So Decidueye seemed like a good play to have on my mind. And then ADP Moltres again, just like day one, except ADP Moltres doesn't really get hard countered by things. It doesn't love Urshifu, and Urshifu being projected to be lower in day two would be a good reason to come back to ADP Moltres. And then I also thought Ice Rider Suicune was good. With maybe people getting scared off of Zacian Luke Metal because of all of the Shadow Rider with 2 paths and all of the Dark Box and the lack of Urshifu around. So Ice Rider Suicune with 2 or 3, Ice Rider Calyrex with 2 or 3 Suicune and Path to the Peak and Stamps was another consideration. And I think by the end of it all, my top 2 going into the night were probably Ice Rider or just net deck a Decialist and send it. But 2 nights ago, not the day before Pog day 1, the day before that, my mom started trying out a Leafeon VMAX list in the Pog format. We had tested Leafeon VMAX in standard post rotation a lot, but not in Pog. I felt like it wouldn't be as good because there's more aggression from tag teams. There's Luca Metal, there's Chaotic Swell to keep your Galar Mine out of there. Welder is still around and people would want to play Welder and Victini, Victini Ray, Victini Umbreon, maybe even some Tempest or Baby Blounds. So I felt like Leafeon was best to save for post rotation. Turns out it did really good in both pods in day 1 of Pog. And then looking at the matchups and estimating the matchups, it was like 50-50 or better versus the whole field. So I took my friend Kat's list. She played it, I forget if she was pod 1 or pod 2. But she played it in day 1 and got into day 2 with it. And there were many other Leafeons that made it from day 1 to day 2 with Leafeon as well. And so I took her base list and made some changes, sent it to her and a few friends. And and I thought Leafeon looked very, very good around the board. 50-50 or better versus Shadow Rider, Eternatus, Luke Metal, Dark Box, ADP Moltres, other Mewtwo variants that aren't Welder, Decidueye, the list goes on. It was just 50-50 or better versus a lot of things. And then I still am not sure what it was like against Suicune and Ice Rider decks because I never did get to play against those. And I didn't test this deck. That's a big thing when you're switching decks between day 1 and day 2 of a tournament that allows you to switch decks like this. Sometimes you don't get to test decks. And if you aren't familiar with a lot of different cards and play styles and you haven't, you don't have all of that kind of backup knowledge or just that general knowledge from playing for a long time, you might not want to switch decks. You might just want to stick with one you're comfortable with. But I went in with Leafeon really not having played. I didn't play a single game with Pog format Leafeon, I don't think. So just kind of theoried out the matchups, and I did watch my friends play a couple games before I went to sleep because I sent them the list over and they wanted to play it too. So I decided not to play Decidueye because I thought Decidueye could not win the tournament. I thought it could get to top 8, maybe top 4. It did get to top 4, but in my head prior to the day 2, I was like, okay, Decidueye seems like a great deck to get to top 8, and then, there's something in your bracket. Either whether it's in top 8 or top 4, you're going to hit the bad matchup that you just can't beat there, like the Inteleon deck or the Tech deck, whatever it is. So that's why I didn't want to play Decidueye, because going into a day 2 event of something like this, 1,200 people, watered down to 180 that make it into day 2, and then we have a top 8 cut. You can only lose one time to get into top 8, and it's kind of like our pseudo worlds. It's the best thing we'll get close to worlds. I'm not going in there just to try to top 8, right? I want to go in there to win, and I thought Leafeon VMAX could win, especially with the hype that Turbo Dark was getting. not Turbo Dark Ops, Dark Box, with the hype that Dark Box was getting, because I felt pretty good against it as long as they didn't pop off. And I did go 2-1 versus Dark Boxes in day 2. I played against 3 of them and lost my winning in, which I could have ID'd in, but I got down paired, so I did have to play that last round and lost it. So I ended up placing 14th, so for a top 16 in the POG Championships 2021. And yeah, that's kind of how I decided on Leafeon VMAX. You know, I just wanted to run you guys through that. Now, I didn't give great detail because I am just kind of talking about this in a one take video. I probably will do a better write up over on my Patreon for my patrons at patreon.com/Celios Network on metagaming at some point, and kind of the disconnect between, do I play Leafeon or do I play Decidueye, or do I play like a meta deck, not a meta counter deck. But we're also going to be focusing on post rotation now a lot. But that metagame knowledge will be something that you can generalize for many formats and metagames to come. So we will be going into the post rotation format for this channel after today's video. So this is the last of the Team Up Through Evolving Skies, and the Celio Stats 2 tournament is Friday, September 10th, the day of rotation. It is free to register for, and we have $1,000 of cash prizes going out to the top 16. With that being said, thank you guys for watching this video, and the list that I played for this Leafeon deck will be in the description down below. But like I said, rotation is coming up, so this list does need to get changed a little bit, and I do have a post-rotation Leafeon VMAX deck on PokemonCard.io, which is in the description down below. Shout out to PotownStore.com, my lovely sponsor. Be sure to use code Celio for 5% off. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time here on Celios Network.